When we set up Tristan several years ago, we started with two basic premises. One, that there would be very little capital available to invest, and that only a handful of people would be able to get their hands on that capital, and that would throw up opportunities in the market, which I think so far is panning out. And second, that the operational environment that fund managers like ourselves would have to operate within was going to get geometrically more complex. And I think once you dig into particularly AIFMD, that is increasingly becoming apparent. If I put my Tristan hat on, I actually quite like that. To be a boutique investment manager with a good track record and others are struggling to raise capital, from a selfish perspective, I have no problem with that. For the regulators to be putting in place rules that force fund managers to have liquidity policies and stress tests of their funds, quite frankly, if they're not doing that already, they don't deserve to be in business. So again, I have no problem with that, and if it increases the complexity of managing money, again, from a Tristan hat-on, very selfish perspective, I quite like that. From an industry perspective, we look at it very simply, which is that the basic process of capital formation in Europe is going to really struggle. As Ad mentioned, most of these provisions here will dramatically reduce the availability of equity. Basel III will dramatically reduce the availability of debt, with some offset from Solvency II, but nowhere close to the hundreds and hundreds of billions of euros that will come out of the banking sector as a result of all these changes. So there's going to be a dramatic change in capital formation. From a Tristan perspective, I quite like that because we will be able to navigate and make money in what will be pretty choppy markets. From an industry, there will be a massive transfer of wealth from Europe and European institutions to the US and to Asia. It's just another one of those big global things that will happen because the US and Asian investors will not have the restrictions, will not have the capital charges, and for them, European investments in real estate will look more and more attractive relative to their own alternatives. So there will be, in Ross Perot's words many years ago, a large sucking sound as European real estate is transferred into the hands of US and Asian investors. If we're lucky, we can capture some of those in our funds and maybe recycle that, but I think that's what's going to happen because the attractiveness for people with large capital charges and inability to raise debt is going to mean that there will be fewer and fewer people who can invest in European real estate. Longer term, one has to question what's going to happen to the liquidity in the marketplace. We all know the figures in terms of how much volume is done nowadays. It's half to a quarter of what used to be done. And that's the only thing that worries me from a Tristan perspective. We think there's going to be tremendous opportunities. We can raise the equity, we can raise the debt. How do we exit in 5 or 6 years' time? Where's the liquidity on the back end to get out? So it's all very well buying cheap assets and getting in and making lots of theoretical paper profits. Our long-term fear is the market liquidity going to return in 5 or 6 years for us to get out and actually crystallize those gains?